This event was supposed to take place last year, but apparently, as all Armenian enterprises go, it took us about a year back and forth with Razmik until we finalized the event. And I'm very happy that we did finalize it, and I'm able to address this wonderful audience today, and also to be able to, yes, here, good. Technology is always a step ahead of us academicians who are not in the field of technology, you know. But let me play with it a little bit. It's better, huh? Yeah. When we were talking about what to present to you guys, Razmik was saying that we want to go to the basics. So let's present something about who the Armenian people are, a very short historical perspective, and then go into the issue of the Armenian genocide, the pre-genocide period, which I call the period of the historical whys that such an event took place. We'll go a little bit into the event itself, and then we'll also discuss some of the issues of what happened afterwards. Just out of curiosity for myself, I want to know what kind of an audience we have today. And I want to know, are there any non-Armenians that are here today? Which is good. I mean, I want to know that, because it also makes sense that because of you, I have to do some introductory notes about Armenian history so that you would be able to get a fuller picture of what I'm speaking about. The issue of Armenian history starts with the issue of the origin of the Armenian people. The issue of the origin of the Armenian people, if you want to read about it, there are lots of books around. It started in the 18th century when some Armenologists started to dig in what is Armenia today, and also in Turkey. Some of the old nations there have left us a record full of cuneiform and even hieroglyphics. And one of the issues was that were Armenians native to the land, or did they come from other place and inhabited the Armenian highlands? The first theories that came out by a Russian specialist, Diakonov, who was one of the academicians who was working with the Indo-European theory in the early 1900s to 1930s, 1940s. He put the Armenians as part of the Indo-European proto-nation, proto-people. Let's not use the word nation, because, as you know, the word nation is a Western construct, and I don't like the Western Eurocentric constructs because they are not germane to this part of the world we are speaking about. They put them in a place which were called the steppes of southern Russia. And I will be accelerating a lot because we don't have much time. But by the 1970s, there came some other Indo-European experts, namely a Russian expert by the name of professor who also taught at UCLA for some time, and also Ivanov, by the way. Ivanov was his name, and also a Georgian professor, Gomgralitse, and also a British expert, Renfrew, who were working on the issue still of the origin of the Indo-European people. And through their research, which they were doing separately, they arrived at the conclusion that if we are going to do a very deep comparative study of the origin of the Indo-European language, all intersections go and show that the origin of the language itself shows that the Armenian highlands are the proto-fatherland of the Indo-European people. By the way, do you understand when I say Indo-European what it means? Have you ever heard about the Indo-European people? To give you a small definition of it, is that these were people who were centered in one place, and then from there they migrated east all the way to India, passing through Afghanistan, etc., and then to the west all the way to Europe. The issue is that all those people come from one, how should I put it, ethnic background, okay, and that the origin where they were living at the beginning of their journey was in the Armenian highlands. So several of the tribes left and went east and west, but some of the tribes remained in the proto-fatherland, and it was from those tribes that the Armenian nation evolved at the end. So this is important because the latest of the theories proves that it was not only Urartu that was the primogenitor of the Armenian nation, but even before Urartu, there were the Indo-Europeans who were the original inhabitants of the land, and thus the Armenians can assume that they are the original inhabitants of the land. The issue that we are speaking about here has nothing to bear maybe in the sense of what we are going to talk about today, but there is a sense of being original or not being original in the political sense of the word, which I don't like, because knowledge and historiography are things that should not be bothered by the politics of the issue. And we do that not because of the politics of the issue, but to learn new things. But regardless of that, those issues are politicized because being original or being original to the land or coming from outside fills into the gaps that some politicians on both sides of the aisle, in this case Armenian and Turkish, etc., use for their own reasons and for political maneuvering, which I don't like. For me, the issue of the original inhabitants of the land being the original inhabitants of the land is almost concluded because most of the academicians that have weight today are siding with the new theory that the origins of the Armenian people indicate that they are from the Armenian plateau or the Armenian highlands. Now, in this plateau, the Armenians have had a history of almost 4 millennia, at least 4 millennia. And during these 4 millennia, they have seen good and bad days. Unfortunately, the position of this land is such that they were always there were some times when they were able to sustain a very strong monarchy, and one of their monarchs, Tigranes the Great, was able even to create some sort of an empire that extended its reaches all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, to the south, including Lebanon, Palestine, and some other territories. But the problem was that the geopolitical situation of Armenia was in such political tectonic place that there were always two strong imperial powers on both sides of this monarchy. One of them being always the Roman Empire, and then later the Byzantine Empire, which was the inheritor of the Roman Empire. This was to the west, and then on the east, it would be the Persian Empire in its different manifestations and names, and then the Arab Empire, and then the empires of the Turkic peoples that came from Central Asia, etc. So there it was very hard for the Armenians to keep their monarchy intact, let alone to be able to withstand the influx of people in order not to change the demography of their own land throughout the centuries. Regardless, it was in the 6th century that the Arabs, starting in the 7th century, the Arabs were the first to come and conquer the land of Armenia. And with the conquering of the land of Armenia, there were some Arab and other Islamic tribes that were brought in, and this created the first demographic change in the land of Armenia. And I call this the first phase of the intermingling of Armenian and Islamic cultures within the land of Armenia. By the way, I should have said, but most of you have already know most probably, but let's just repeat that Armenia as a kingdom had already accepted Christianity in 301 AD. That's at least what the Armenian chroniclers say. And so it is known as the first nation to accept Christianity. Now, with the influx of the Muslim tribes, we are having the first place, most probably, aside from the Middle East, where there were Christian communities, and we are going to speak about those communities today, because today the Middle East is in really dire shape, and we don't know what's going to happen to the map of the Middle East as we speak, because it is changing. But aside from that, Armenia was the new place where the East and West, i.e. Christianity and Islam, were meeting, and also a new kind of dialogue between the two faiths. A new kind of culture was also emerging. This situation continued until the 10th century, most probably 11th century, when the Turkic invasions started. The first was in 1071 AD, when Alparslan with his army came in, and there was the Battle of Manzikert. Armenia was at that point a protectorate, in a sense, of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines withdrew, and Armenia, in this case, was open for Turkic invasions. And with them, the Turks brought in their own people in. The Turks were not yet Islamized, but eventually they accepted Islam as their faith. And here again, the second tier of interaction between Armenians and Islamic Turks also started. And there are centuries of cohabitation and coexistence, but also, at the same time, the demographics of the area that is known to us as historical Armenia are changing because of the newcomers who are changing the balance of the population. With the advent of the Ottoman Empire in the 15th, 16th centuries, and also the Persian Empire at the time, Armenia was divided between two imperial powers, the land of Armenia, the Armenian highlands. So we have for the first time a Western Armenia and an Eastern Armenia. I don't know what happened. Something happened to my voice?
Yeah.
Although the thing is showing okay, but is this no? Testing some wires are having problems maybe. Okay. Where were we? Yes. So Armenia was divided between two empires. And this is an important landmark in the case of Armenian history. Because by being divided into two empires and having an imperial border passing through the land of the same people, now we will have two kinds of Armenians. A Western Armenian which will go in his own way, and Eastern Armenian which will go in his own way. Even the language is going to change a bit. We will have Western Armenian spoken and Eastern Armenian spoken differently. And all this is creating fissures between the same people. Even today, for example, those fissures that I'm speaking about exist. We will have, for example, Armenians who are more imbued within Persian culture, and we will have Armenians who are more imbued with Ottoman culture because they are living under the rule of these two empires. And this also creates a problem if we are going to speak about a nation composed of two components which have different cultural and cultural values, as a matter of fact. Of course, there are a couple of things for which Armenians are still on the same page, but there are lots of things that Armenians are not on the same page. This is going to be exacerbated in the coming decades or the coming centuries when Eastern Armenia is going to be taken out of Persian control and it will go under Russian control. This will happen especially in the 1820s to the 30s when the Russians would come down into the Caucasus and would take the four khanates that represent Eastern Armenia, namely the khanates of Erevan, Nakhichevan, Elizabethpol, and the Khanate of Garabet, and incorporate them into the Russian Empire. They will take them away from the Persian Empire and incorporate them into the Russian Empire. Now, after this, the Persian influence is going to be coming down, and instead we will start having a Russian influence. And even today, for the past 170 years, then, Russian influence is one of the characteristics that we will see over Eastern Armenians. So we can't say today that we can neglect an influence that has 170 years of existence that has played an important role in the formation of the Eastern Armenian communities that we see today. And what are those communities that we are speaking about? The communities in what is Armenia proper today, the community of the Armenians in Garabet, the community of Armenians in Georgia, which is Java, and the most important two cities in the Caucasus. Can somebody tell me which are the most important two cities in the Caucasus which were outside the Armenian realm but were full of Armenians, governed by Armenians, or if not governed by Armenians, by Armenian capital? The BB, I call them. No, the B and the F. Baku and Tiflis. Tbilisi. Okay, so you will see that in Armenia, Eastern Armenia proper, there are Armenians, and after the incorporation of those lands into Russian rule, the number of Armenians is getting more and more because of the exchange of population that happened after the wars of the 1820s and 1830s. I'm not going to go into detail. Those were the treaties of Turkmenchai and then Gulistan. But the important thing is that the Armenian element is starting to get more and more important in Eastern Armenia. But the Armenian centers of cognizance, the Armenian center of capital, the Armenian center of the arts and culture are not within the Armenian lands. They are outside of Armenia, and the most important of them, one is in Baku and the other one is in Tiflis. Even today, Tiflis, for example, has an Armenian population of 80,000, and then there is also Java, which has an Armenian population of about 200,000. And those are important issues if one is to look at the map of Georgia, because Georgia itself is an amalgam of different nationalities and ethnicities. And that's why Georgia is very hard to envision Georgia as a nation state. I'm not saying that Armenia is a nation state, even though Armenia is one of the purest in terms of the ethnicity. But even Armenia is not a nation state because they don't have a definition, let alone a concept, written concept of what the nation state is for them. But in the case of Georgia, for example, there are lots of ethnic minorities that, and you know that some of them have already declared their independence from the country. In the case of Azerbaijan, for example, you still have minorities there, like the Talish and this and that, which also makes Azerbaijan a problematic country, but also Azerbaijan itself, because of the petrodollars, has become a very corrupt government, as all oil-rich countries become at the end. That's one of the problems that we have. Look at the Arab states with oil. All of them are corrupt at the end, in the Middle East, for example. And that's something that we have to take into consideration. By the way, did I tell you that at the end we will have a Q&A session, and I want you to get involved in that? So please, whenever you have something, just jot down your ideas or your comments or your questions, and I will be glad to answer it. Now, what was the reasoning then behind what happened in 1915? To answer that, I have to go back to the period of the decade before the genocide. In this decade, which starts in 1905 and goes into 1915, if you look at the political map of the Caucasus, you will see that there are three revolutions taking place. All three of them are constitutional revolutions. People want constitutions. And all three of them are happening within the confines of imperial states. The first one is Imperial Russia, where a constitutional revolution took place in 1905, and the Tsar was able to oppress it with an iron fist. This was the revolution that resulted in the Bloody Sunday, if some of you have read about it. But at the end, even the Tsar understood that he can't only oppress the people, so he started thinking about a Duma, a representative house of the people, but still kept most of the power in his hands. The second revolution was the Mashrutiyat constitutional revolution that happened in Iran from 1907 all the way to 1912. And it was Russia, by the way, and the British, in a sense, which crushed it because they didn't want a constitutional government to come in Iran, because such a government could create a momentum for the population and the country would go forward. And this would mean that the imperial powers of the time would not be able to go and do their get their concessions as they were getting it under the current, let's say, Shah's rule. So they were very adamant in crushing the revolution and bringing the Shah back. The third revolution was what happened in 1908 in Turkey, in the Ottoman Empire. And it brought in the Young Turks to the government. Here too, the European powers were not that happy, even though for a long time they were saying to those countries that, yes, you need some sort of, we need some sort of, the word it was tanzimat. We need you to become countries that respects the law, respects the citizens, etc. But all these were like words, okay? In reality, they didn't want it because they had capitulations in those countries, and they didn't want those countries to become countries that were good for their citizens. For talk, it was cheap. Talk is cheap. Even today, they are saying the same thing about a litany of countries in the Middle East, but they don't want those countries to go ahead and become good countries because that is not good for their business. The issue was that Europe, Imperial Europe in a sense, was interested in the riches of those empires. And it was doing business and getting all those riches. As a matter of fact, there are some theories which state that Europe was able to become Europe because of the monies it siphoned from other countries, other peoples. And today, there is an analogy that we can put, that when the coffers of Europe are empty, Europe is once again vying for those countries, for those same places, to go and bring in the money to fill its coffers once again. This is the way things are in the world, by the way. It's not that I made them that way, it has been that way. And this is the reality. Of the three revolutions that I mentioned, there is one common denominator that is very interesting. Armenians were active participants in all three revolutions. The Russian one in the Caucasus as revolutionaries and fighters in the Anjomans in Iran, and in the fighting, revolutionary Mujahideen in Iran, and also as longtime allies with the Young Turks who were trying to topple the Abdul Hamid's rule and bring in a new kind of a polity that was based on the tenets of Ottomanism, which would take away the old Sharia kind of law and bring in a new European-style political system whereby there would be no difference between a Muslim and a Christian. All citizens would be equal in front of the law. Now, this created a problem for the Muslim landowners, because the Muslim was not good in commerce or the artisanships. The Muslim elite was landlord. They were landlords, or they were peasants working on the land. They had a piece of land and were working on that land. Now, the issue with Armenians was that Armenians had lots of possibilities. If they were able to be considered equal in front of the law, the Muslim elite, especially the landlords, thought of it this way. For centuries, we have been able to stop Armenian advancement because we were able to rule over them because of the religious superiority that we possessed. If that is taken from us, it's only a matter of time before we became their workers under their hands. This was, for example, what happened in 1909 in Adana, when Abdul Hamid's people tried, on the one hand, to start a counter-revolution in Constantinople, and also started what became the massacres of Adana in 1909. I say that the root was economical, because Adana was a special place where Armenian capital had played a role and had shown what would have become of the Ottoman Empire in the future. In the vilayet of Adana, Armenians were able to cultivate the land and take the product of that cultivation, bring it to their factories in Adana, and then produce the products that they would send to Europe and sell. Okay? Now, this was something that the Muslim landlord could not take it anymore, because he couldn't do it. And it was the government, they said, the Young Turks, who themselves were not Muslims, by the way, for them, because all of them came from Salonika, which was the place of the dönme. I mean, i.e., Jews who had become Muslims. You know the theory that goes even today. There are issues in Turkey about the dönme, who are supposedly Jews who have become Muslims, but in reality, in secrecy, they are still Jews or something. Like the case of the Islamized Armenians, which became a staple like about 15 years ago when Hrant Dink brought the taboo out, the taboo that was not supposed to come out. He brought it out. Now, this was a reactionary movement by Abdul Hamid's people because Islam could not tolerate such a thing. Okay? But at the same time, there were other people, other forces that were playing on this Islamic way of thinking. If you look at the archival resources that we have, and I'm an archival historian, and I have looked at the Ottoman archives and Armenian archives and Russian archives, you would see that in the 6 eastern vilayets of the Ottoman Empire, Russia is playing a very dirty game during those days. The Kurds have a big problem because during the past decades, they have usurped Armenian lands from Armenian peasants. Okay? Now the government is telling them that you have to return those lands back to their real owners. The Kurd now is having a problem. How can a Christian have so much rights and I would lose the rights that I had over them? Imagine Abdul Hamid had even created the Hamidiyya regiments in order for the Kurds to be able to suppress Armenians. Now, Russia is telling them, look what's happening, this is not good for you, and even giving them the arms they need to go against the government and against the Armenians. And this also is creating a problem whereby the central government, the Young Turks, are trying to impose the rule of law and also helping Armenians in some cases by arming them in order for them to protect themselves against Kurdish depredations. It's that complex of a situation. Now what happens? All this is going to play into something that we will call later the Armenian Genocide. By the way, the word is not there yet. It was only formulated in 1943 and taken into the convention in 1948. Now, aside from these two issues that I just mentioned, there is also the issue of the Young Turk regime being also put under pressure by Europe through another situation. They just come to power. The first year, they have to face a counter coup in 1909, and then the Adana events, and then another coup in the Yemen. The Arabs are standing up, and then Italy goes and attacks Tripolitania, Libya, and then in 1912, the Balkan people, the Balkan Christians, not only Christians by the way, even Muslims, Albanians, are up in arms and want to get their independence. Now this is a very problematic issue because in the Balkans what happened is that there are almost 500,000, in Adana for example, there are 30,000 Armenians who were killed in a very short period of time. And this gives us the sensation of what ethnic cleansing is, because the massacres before that are not that big in that short of a period, okay? If you look at the Balkan wars, you will see the cleansing of ethnic Muslims at the hands of the Balkan Christians, and also the deportation of those Muslims into Anatolia. And this is also problematic because when those people come to Anatolia and they are divided among the provinces, who are the Christians that they are going to see except the Armenians? And if they have any vengeance against Christians, the only Christian they will see is the Armenians. So in their mind, in their mindset, it's a matter of substitution. Balkan Christians, they can't do anything because they were taken out from there, and now they see the Armenians there, Christians. Okay? So all these things, put them together, and you will see that there is a problematic situation in the Ottoman Empire, and the Western powers are just watching from away. They are doing nothing. They did nothing, for example, when the issues started in the Balkans. They just watched as those massacres were taking place. They just watched when Italy brought in its armies into Libya. They just watched when the Arabs started to revolt. As a matter of fact, they didn't just watch. They were the ones who gave the first, as they say, gave the signal, the green light through people like Lawrence of Arabia, etc., who were clandestine agitators who were sent to those areas to do exactly that. Now, for the Young Turks, there was an issue. The issue was this: Balkan is going away from the empire. The Arab vilayets, or the Arab part of the empire, is going to be taken away. Okay? And now the Russians come and woo the Armenians. Let's also put your demands of some sort of self-rule in the eastern vilayets. Now, all these amounted to the Young Turk government seeing that nothing is going to be left of the empire. Okay? All these are very productive ground for something to happen, and what they were trying to come up with Ottomanism as the ideology of the day, Ottomanism faltered, and instead a very dormant ideology until that time, Turkism, became a very strong and important one because of necessity. Because the Turks saw that there is no other way for them except to keep whatever is going to be left of their country. And also Turkism also gave them the possibility of, instead of the Arabs and the Balkans, to open ways and unite with their brethren all the way into Central Asia. This was at least what ideologues like Yusuf Akçura and others were thinking, and also people in the government like Enver Pasha was thinking. But aside from all of this, if you go and look into the archival documents, you will see that still there is no smoking gun in terms of killing the Armenians premeditatedly, because that happened only after the Generalissimo Enver, who was so full of himself, and I can do with the Russians in one battle. In December of 1914, he lost a big loss in Sarıkamış. He was not supposed to lose because the Russians had sent the best of their armies against Germany. Okay? So he was not supposed to lose. It was only his not being able to, or his lack of military knowledge that caused the defeat, because he attacked the Russians in a very hard winter when his army was not equipped with winter clothing, winter this, winter that, or even food. Now, once the defeat happened, okay, he had to find a scapegoat. And it was at this point that we see that he starts writing to Talat Pasha that we have been betrayed. And we have been betrayed by Armenians, even though it was not as such. So Enver is trying to build a case and saying that because we were betrayed, we have to take those people out from the areas that are on the front. One man deciding the fate of a whole people who had lived on their land and are the original inhabitants for the past 4,000 years because of his stupid defeat. Okay, he could have done otherwise. There were lots of other possibilities that he could choose. One of them would have been not to attack in December, in winter, or wait, like the Germans were telling him, or this or that. Nevertheless, history, we can't say, I wish they did this way, they did it that way. It happened. And it was after that that the issue of the massacres or the deportation took place, and imagine who jumped into all of this. The Kurds, because they already had the issue with the revolution of 1908, okay? They were losing the battle against the Armenians, and then